Timothy McVeigh was... I have a man inside of me. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Sky Webb and I'm here to talk about a true crime story that I cannot get off my mind. But before I get started, I just want to put out a little disclaimer that I mean no harm to any of the victims or the victims' families, and I wish everybody who was hurt within this story that most peace and solace either in rest or in recovery. With that out of the way, how the hell is everybody? How is the new year treating you guys? Does anybody have any New Year's resolutions? And if you do, are you sticking to them? I decided for my New Year resolution, I would eat more healthy and clean, which means no McDonald's for me, which if you know me, I have a severe McDonald's addiction, so I'm like dying inside.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
But I'm sticking to it, so I'm pretty proud of me. Gold star for me, basically. So for today's video, I'm going to be talking about Timothy McVeigh, who was an American domestic terrorist. American domestic terrorist. Terrorist? Terrorist. 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 Oh no. So for today's video, I'm going to be talking about Timothy McVeigh, and he was an American domestic terrorist who was sentenced to death and killed in 2001. So Timothy, being on death row, was awarded one last meal, which is basically just where you get to pick whatever food that you want for dinner. I mean, I guess it's not dinner, but like, it's just your last meal before being executed. And seeing as I am desperately missing yummy food in my life, I decided it would be a really good idea, for me at least, to eat Timothy's last meal while I give you some of the details about his crimes. You get to hear about his horrific attacks and I get to eat yummy food, so it's a win-win situation. So for Timothy's last meal, he ordered 2 pints of mint choc chip ice cream. And so I have not 2 pints of choc chip mint ice cream, but I have this, and that is close enough. Okay, I thought it would be green, but it's like white. Oh. I hate when people talk with their mouth open. And also, I hate big spoons. But yeah, cheers. Last meal, me and Timothy. Good job. I hope I haven't just cursed myself to like drop dead and this is the last thing I've ate, because it's good, but it's not that good. Timothy McVeigh was born on the 23rd of April in 1968, and he was the second of 3 children. His parents, Mickey and William, were both Irish Americans, and they got divorced when Timothy was only about 10 years old. This left Timothy with his dad, and he and his dad lived in New York while he was growing up. As a child, he was bullied pretty heavily, pretty badly, and that's something he kind of carried with him for the rest of his life. Even as an adult, he claimed that the government was a bully. In fact, he said the government was the biggest bully of them all. So during high school, he became super withdrawn, and he kind of just like laid back and let the bullying continue, trying to ignore it the best he could, but not really doing anything to stop it. He became super interested in computers, and he was a smart kid, but he also just had a lot of time to invest into computers and learning about it because he really didn't have any social life. So while he was still in high school, he actually began hacking into government computer systems, and because of this, he was named the most promising computer programmer in his school at like a function. You know how they do little competitions of like who's what? He got named that, despite having pretty consistently bad grades. Everybody just knew that he was really good with computers. Besides computers though, Timothy was also super interested in firearms, and that's something that he learned from his grandfather. He became really interested in gun rights and the Second Amendment, and that was something he really advocated for. And he actually used to bring firearms into school to try and impress his classmates or try and show off, and that was really the only time that he sort of came out of his shell, because it was something he loved and he thought was like this really cool thing, and so he thought, of course it's gonna impress the people around me because it would have impressed himself. So after high school, Timothy went to college for a very short period of time before dropping out and becoming an armored car guard, where his co-workers claimed he was just crazily obsessed with guns, just obsessed to the next level with firearms. One co-worker in particular claimed that he would show up to work wearing a bandolier? I can't speak. Surprise, surprise. But if you don't know what that is, which I'm not surprised if you don't because I didn't say it correctly, it's basically like this belt that you can like wear over you, like a vest type thing, but it's like a thing, like a seatbelt, but like not a seatbelt. I'm just gonna put a picture on the screen because I don't make sense. But basically you carry like bullets and ammunition in it, so it's kind of a crazy thing to show up to work in. Like he'd literally rock up to work and be like, alright boys, let's go. Like, weird. But then when Timothy was 20 years old, he signed up for the army and he had a lot of free time. Well, not a lot of free time, but like free time during his period in the army. So he would study a lot about firearms, sniper tactics, and explosives. Things really started to pick up pace after this, and looking from the outside in, he had a really successful career in the army. He became a sergeant very quickly, but he did acquire a reputation for assigning the less desirable jobs, like the shitty jobs that no one really wanted to do, to black men. And that wasn't really a great reputation to have. He was also reprimanded for wearing a white power t-shirt and using racial slurs. Despite this though, he was awarded quite a few medals. He was awarded the Bronze Star Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Southwest Asia Service Medal, an Army Service Ribbon, and a Liberation Medal before being honorably discharged in 1991. After this, it became a hobby for him to write into newspapers and to contact his like local government representatives and basically just complain and whinge or express his opinion about certain things, especially taxes, about how they had to pay too many taxes and it was ridiculous and the government was out to get them, and also for things he just really didn't agree about. For example, there was a woman who was arrested for carrying mace in her handbag, and he wrote into a government representative about how wrong that is, and a lot of stuff about how he just thinks it's wrong and they should have a right to carry that kind of stuff. And it all came down to his belief in like gun rights and the ability to protect themselves, and he really felt that the government was out to get him and everybody else. He'd also speak a lot about blood being shed, or like the necessity of blood being shed in order to wake these people up and teach them a lesson. Like he would constantly refer to how many people need to get hurt before you realize, how much blood needs to be shed before you realize, like those sort of things. He was unable to find a girlfriend for majority of his life. He had about one girlfriend his entire life, and that wasn't really anything serious. And at this point, a lot of his advances towards women were being rejected, so he was kind of having a tough time. He was no longer in the army. He didn't really have a purpose. Girls didn't like him. It was just not a fun time for Timothy. And so at this point, he developed quite a severe gambling addiction. He would lose a significant amount of money gambling. And then he discovered gun shows, and this was like his new hobby, something that sort of gave him purpose, I guess. And so he would travel around going to different gun shows. He would sell bumper stickers and t-shirts and like anti-government literature and all kinds of things. But then he was informed that the army had actually overpaid him while he was working for them about $1,000 or more, and he had to pay all of that money back. And at this point he was like fuming. Like he didn't really have $1,000 to pay back. He felt that that was wrong and that was stealing from him, and he was absolutely livid about the situation. And from that point on, his anti-government ideologies became a lot more radical. So now he was selling items at these gun shows. He was making propaganda videos. He would do speeches, and he would sort of call people in at gun shows and try and convince everybody that the government was corrupt. He started to suspect government cover-ups and things along that nature, and he in particular really despised the use of CS gas on women and children by the US government, because when he was initiated into the army, he became familiar with the effects of that gas, and so he knew sort of how severe it was, and he was really disgusted that that would be used on women and children. He also even visited Area 51 because he was so rebellious against the government that he wanted to rebel against their no filming sort of laws around Area 51, and so he went there to film as like a fuck you, stick it to the man type thing. He was ahead of his time when it comes to Area 51. Timothy then decided and announced that he would like to move on from his propaganda stage and move into his action stage of life. So now he was considering assassinations, and he actually had a list of people that he wanted to assassinate. On that list, it included an attorney general, a judge, and an FBI agent. So a lot of these people were powerful people, people who work for the government, people who had the ability to make change, and he felt a lot of prejudice against these people in particular. But he came to the conclusion that carrying out these assassinations would be far too hard. He thought that if he was to kill one, they might catch him, or they might catch on to like his plan before he could kill the next one, and he just thought there was too much work, there was too much to figure out, and it was just too hard to carry out assassinations. And so he decided, in order to carry out further justice than just assassinating people, he decided that he needed to hit them at their command centers. And this is when he decided that the biggest statement he could possibly make was to bomb a federal building. So Timothy and his friend Terry Nichols constructed this explosive, and Terry sort of knew more about it and was able to give him the information that he needed in order to build it. And this explosive device consisted of over 2,000 kilos of ammonium nitrate and nitromethane. So after they built this little bomb, not so little bomb, they strapped it to the back of a Ryder truck that they had rented, and Timothy drove it to the Alfred P. Murray Federal Building. He managed to get there just before the offices were about to open for the day, and shortly before he arrived, he stopped to light a 2-minute fuse. So once he got there, the plan was that he would leave, 2 minutes countdown, and the bomb would explode. And at 9 a.m, that's exactly what it did. The bomb went off, creating a huge explosion and destroying the whole north half of the building. He managed to injure 684 people and further killed 168 people. 19 of the people who were killed were children at a daycare on the 2nd floor. More than 300 buildings were damaged from the explosion, and there was over 12,000 volunteers and rescue officers that were needed to take part in the rescue to get everybody out. Just to put this into perspective, this was the largest ever terrorist attack in all of America up until 9/11. This was huge. Think of how many people you know. Do you know 168 people? Can you imagine all 168 of these people dying in an explosion? Worse yet, can you imagine 19 children that you know personally dying like this? It's a lot of people, and it affected hundreds of families. Timothy later went on to claim that he had no idea that there was a childcare centre on the 2nd floor, and he claimed that had he have known that, he might have reconsidered hitting that building in that spot. But his partner in crime, Terry, claimed that they did know that there was a childcare on the 2nd floor. In fact, he claimed that they did know and just simply didn't care. After this, the FBI got involved pretty much immediately, and they were able to trace the number plate from the truck back to the rental place. So from there, a sketch artist worked with one of the employees to drop a sketch of the person who had hired the truck, because they used a fake name. They used the alias Robert Kling. And shortly afterwards, an owner of a motel was able to identify the person in the sketch as being Timothy, and the case was solved. Easy done. He wasn't actually apprehended by the FBI though. He was actually apprehended by a cop who was pulled over for driving without a number plate, and then once he was pulled over, he got in trouble for having a firearm on him that wasn't legal. So then he was charged with possession of an illegal firearm, and from then, when he was in the cells, they were able to sort of track it down that that was the guy from the sketch that they had identified, and he was taken to prison. On the 10th of August 1995, Timothy was inducted of 11 counts of federal crimes, including conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, use of a weapon of mass destruction, destruction with the use of explosives, and 8 counts of murder. So Timothy wanted to use a necessity defense, which basically means that he would have claimed he was in imminent threat from the government, and that's why he had to do what he did. It's like it's necessity plea, and his lawyers basically were like, dude,
no, you can't do that. You're not under imminent threat. Like, no.
And he basically came back to them and was like,
Imminent doesn't mean immediate. I'm still under imminent threat. It just was an immediate threat.
and it became this like thing, but eventually they just scrapped it. They were like, no dude, we can't do that. On the 2nd of June 1997, he was found guilty on all charges, and on the 13th he was recommended for the death penalty. So because of this, he would only formally be charged for 8 counts of first degree murder, and the other 168 people that he did murder wouldn't be included in that, at least not on paper. Everybody knew that he had done it, but he wouldn't be formally charged for it. And that's because 168 of the victims were civilians, not federal agents or people who worked for the government. Therefore, they were under the jurisdiction of Oklahoma and not the federal jurisdiction. It just means he wasn't on paper like formally charged for those murders, but everybody knows he did it. And if they wanted him to have the death penalty, that's just how it had to be. They couldn't do both. So Timothy tried to appeal his death sentence a couple of times and they were dismissed. He then tried to have his execution televised across all of America. He obviously wanted to put on some kind of show, and that was immediately dismissed as well. Thank goodness nobody wanted to give him that kind of attention. And then he ended up dismissing all of his appeals himself because he didn't want to wait in prison for another 20 something years before he was killed. He just wanted to die, so that's what he did. And he did a couple of interviews. He made a couple of comments about what he did. He said he wasn't sorry for it. The only thing he was sorry for was not doing it bigger. He wished he could take the entire building down. He made a couple of comments about religion and things along those lines, but there was just one thing that I found quite interesting and worth sharing, and that was this. So he said that if there is a hell, then I'll be in good company with a lot of fighter pilots who also had to bomb innocents in order to win the war. And I think that really goes to show his mindset, that he truly thought that this was something that he had to do. I feel as though he would have taken a lot of that mindset from the army and sort of applied it to his own situation, and that's not necessarily the right thing to do. Obviously, they're two very different situations. Another interesting thing to add is that while he was incarcerated, his IQ was assessed, and he was given an IQ of 126. So for the record, an average IQ is between 90 and 110. So anything over 120 is considered superior in like IQ terminology. And now I'm really curious what my IQ would be, probably like 5. So Timothy had his last meal, 2 pints of mint choc chip ice cream. Solid choice. Yeah. I blame Timothy. Then on the 11th of June, he was executed by lethal injection. So Bill Clinton signed a legislation that stopped any veterans who had committed capital crimes from being buried in a military cemetery. And because of this legislation being signed, he couldn't be buried. So he had to be cremated instead. And originally he asked for his ashes to be spread at the site of the building that he blew up. The site where he killed 168 people, he wanted his ashes to be spread across. That's how proud of this horrendous attack he was. Luckily, though, nobody was there to claim his ashes, and so his ashes were actually awarded to his lawyer, and his lawyer said, nah dude. His lawyer said it was too vengeful and it wouldn't be appropriate, and so he decided not to do that, which, thank Lord, like common sense. But he did say that the final resting place and the location of his ashes would be kept privileged and that nobody needs to know. Terry Nichols also went to trial and he was found guilty of all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison for his part of the crime, which was assisting in the information on how to build a bomb. And that is the case of the largest domestic terrorist attack in the United States to date. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, or you can head over to my Facebook, which is Skyweb with 3 B's, and let me know there. I would love to know what you guys think. I'd love to know what you guys think about his ideologies and whether or not you think there's any truth to some of the things that he was thinking or feeling or saying or spreading. And I'd love to know what you think about his final statements and the fact that his IQ was so high. With an IQ that high, you'd assume there's some sort of substance somewhere in his thought process, but to do what he did, super wrong, super bad. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear it. So be sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you feel like it. I would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so that you can see all my new videos. I post every single Thursday all about true crime. And sometimes I eat ice cream. Make sure you guys are being safe out there. Don't join the army. Don't go to government buildings. And don't send your kids to childcare. Okay, ew, no. I don't like that. No funny thing to make a joke about. Scratch that. Just be safe. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Bye!